Hey everyone, welcome back to Mike's Movie Talk, the show where we talk about movies. I'm Mike Myers, and today I have a very special guest with us, Kitty Nichols. And today we're going to be talking about The Incredibles.
Woo!
Kitty, I know you're such a massive fan of The Incredibles. Tell me a little bit
am.
about what this movie means to you.
I have seen this movie an inordinate amount of times. It's probably concerning, but I know the script really, really well, and we'll start kind of riffing. I don't know who will start to say something from the movie, and then the other person will immediately.
It's like a
finish
trigger
the line.
because I will say a line from the movie, and you know way more lines from the movie than I do, and I will say a line, and then you'll just keep going.
I finished the scene, but the reason that this happens, I feel like it just flips something in my brain because when I was in elementary school, I had a cassette tape that had the audio from The Incredibles. So not even an audio book type thing, but it was the voice actors, everything from the movie, just in a recording, and I would listen to it as I fall asleep. So I have that I don't want to say the entire script ingrained, but I have about 85% of that script ingrained into my mind. And it'll be something really small, and then we're just I wonder
what the purpose was for that cassette. Would you listen to it in your car? I'm gonna listen to The Incredible.
Well,
it's just such a strange concept.
I don't know. I have no idea where my parents got it either. Maybe it's from the Disney store or something. I have no clue.
I don't know.
But
very strange.
It ended up in our possession, and I spent a lot of my childhood listening to this.
So it's become a part of yourself now.
Yes, but actually, it kind of gets in the way of watching the actual movie because there are things in the audio tape, because it was just the audio, obviously, that they... things in the movie that you didn't really understand what was going on because you weren't seeing any visuals. The audio tape had a narrator go over it. And so then I'd be watching the movie, and there's this one scene with Edna and Helen, and she's like, "Do you know where he is?" And she goes, "Of course." Helen says, "Of course." And then Edna goes, "Do you know where he is?" And in the audiobook, the narrator comes over and says, "The truth was Helen didn't know where Bob was." And
oh my God.
I watched the movie, and I don't know when it happened, but I remember watching the movie at some point, and it doesn't do that in the movie. And I was
Where's
really
the narrator?
confused because I was like, where did I get that? Did I just make that up? And then I realized, no, it's just in the audiobook. So
that's a very strange medium of consuming The Incredibles, I would say.
I don't know. I think it's cool. I had one for The Little Mermaid, too.
Oh, yeah. There's probably got all of them in there.
It wasn't the same. The Incredibles...
It's different.
It does. It's different.
Anyway, so just some background info on The Incredibles. It came out in 2004, and it was written and directed by Brad Bird, which we will also be talking about later. I know you're not familiar with him, but...
I know he did Ratatouille.
He also did Ratatouille, yes.
I watched the last episode.
Yes, I appreciate that. So The Incredibles, just an overview, follows a family of superheroes led by Bob and Helen Parr, which are Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl, as they're forced to come out of hiding and confront a fan-turned-villain named Syndrome.
A super fan.
Which we will also talk about Syndrome a lot because he's just a fantastic villain. So Brad Bird, just to give some background on the behind-the-scenes creation of this movie, he also did The Iron Giant. Have you seen The Iron Giant?
Oh yes, we had that on VHS.
That was one of his first big movies that he did. It was 2D animated, and it's held in really high acclaim by a lot of people. So that was 1999. So he was very disappointed after the failure of this movie. And I looked online, and it actually said he visited multiple cineplexes only to view the film in empty auditoriums. Isn't that so sad? Can you imagine walking to your theater and be like, "Oh yeah, The Iron Giant, opening weekend." You walk in and no one's there. So he's pitching this idea for The Incredibles to different animation studios because he's thinking, I could make this into a 2D animated film because even though 3D was on the rise, he had worked in 2D before with Iron Giant and stuff, so that's really what he was used to.
Yeah.
So the Pixar actually picked up his script, and he was actually the first outside director not working in Pixar to direct a Pixar movie.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
So what they did is the Pixar told him to bring in a bunch of his team that worked on the Iron Giant, and allowed them to work on the movie within Pixar.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. So that was, I was researching, and it was like a lot of those people were not used to working in 3D animation.
Yeah.
It was all, they were like really good at 2D, but then 3D is just like a whole different animal.
Well, I was going to say, for 2004, like, the animation for The Incredibles is really good.
Oh, yeah.
Especially because, like, nowadays, a lot of Pixar films and a lot of Disney films, too, it's like all 3D animation. And there's even like a movement, some people want the 2D animation to come back because it's got that like classic feel. But I remember vaguely when when I first watched The Incredibles, or it was one of the first movies like from my childhood that I remember like really noticing the 3D, kind of like Toy Story, you know, how it was very new and interesting. But I remember I read something not too long ago too about the detail that they just put into their hair, because you can see like their hair at one point. I'm thinking of Helen's in specifically, but it's just slightly messed up, and you can see the individual strands coming down. And in 2004, that's like, it's a big deal.
And we've talked about like, and this is continuing, this episode's continuing the animated trend I've got going, because we talked about Rango and we talked about Ratatouille. Which this is unintentionally continuing an animated trend, but I probably will talk about more animated movies in the future. But we talked about, like, you know, in earlier episodes about how Pixar kind of in their earlier years with every movie they made big steps in certain details. Like we were talking about, like Monsters Inc. was a big one for hair.
Yes.
With Sully's hair, and then Finding Nemo was underwater and just different materials and everything. The Incredibles was big for lots and lots of different things all at once. And one of the big things was like, this is the first time that they had an all-human cast too.
Oh, really? Oh, that's kind of a bizarre concept to think about.
Yeah, because people are like the hardest thing to make look good in 3D animation, and they hadn't reached that level. Like I mean, there were people in short segments of other movies, but they were never the main character. Like they had Boo in Monsters Inc. and they had like a few characters in Finding Nemo, but they were never the main stars like all the way through, you know, just because they weren't at that level yet.
I did not know that. I'd never thought about that before.
Disney like initially was reluctant to even make this movie at all, because they were like, they looked at Brad Bird's storyboards and script and everything, and they're like, you know, they're like, are we going to be able to do this? And I was looking at, and they said the Pixar animators, I guess Brad Bird described like going into a room and telling him what they want, or telling them what he wanted, and they're all just like turned white. They're like, we can't do this. Like, this is going to cost like $500 million in like 10 years.
Oh my God.
How are we going to do this? But I mean, because they were talking about, it's got like everything that's hard to do, or was hard to do at that point with CG. They've got realistic hair, water, fire, clothing. They've got like explosions, and all the human characters to begin with.
Oh, and the explosions feel so real when they're
I know,
in
and the lighting
places.
and
yes, because that changes when they're in the plane crash or the jet crash at one point. That entire sequence when their hair gets wet and like it was so interesting to look at, but also when it exploded, their faces all lit up when there's the what is it? The rocket in the like volcano tunnel. Yeah,
and clouds and smoke too.
Yeah.
They made like entirely new systems to
ice
do that.
Too. Frozone's ice was so cool to look at. I don't know, because it was like really spiky, but
you could just see like the texture of it.
Yeah. I don't know, and when the cop tries to shoot the bullet and he freezes that, I thought that was such a cool scene.
I mean, you're like, that's ice. You can see the texture and the feeling of it.
I think the sound design for this movie is really good too.
I was reading that they didn't get down the design for, or like they didn't manage to get Violet's hair right until very shortly before the movie was even released.
Oh wait, I think I read that.
Because they were like, we can't have, like Violet needs to have this hairstyle because it's part of her character, you know, because she's like kind of hiding and just doesn't want anyone to see her, you know, she's got this, she's very emo, yes.
Yeah. Like fair.
But that was really hard for them, and you know, all these other different effects, and they said like they had 4 times the number of locations that any other Pixar movie had. Just
why did they make her love interest so ugly?
Insane amount of work. Who?
He's really ugly.
Oh yeah,
Tony Writing.
That's and we can talk about that's like with Incredibles 2, because that picks up right off. I mean, I don't know what you think of Incredibles 2.
Yeah, it's fine.
That's another story. But
It's not the same. But I do think that they fixed some animation. Like some
That's-
things
yeah,
that
that's
they
what I
did
was gonna
update,
say.
you know, as technology presented
Mhm.
itself and it became more of a commonplace thing.
Yeah.
They made Tony,
Tony
Violet's love
looks
interest,
way better in
he
Incredibles
looks
2.
like, you know, like the cute boy next door. But
Yeah.
then, and you know, I never even thought about it when I watched the first Incredibles movie. And then you go back
He
and
looks-
I see
yeah, he-
comparisons with the two of them.
Yes.
He looks like a 38-year-old man. Like, he looks
I know.
horrifying.
It looks awful. And just like, and having the two, or like having those same characters, but with like 15 years of difference in technology.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we need to make the same characters, but we have all these other tools at our disposal.
The
So,
writing for the first one was just so much better
Oh,
than
yeah.
the writing for the second one, though.
Yeah. I mean, we can get into the second one later, but anyway, just insane animation all around,
Yeah.
and just people at Pixar are so talented to be able to pull this off and not have it like take 10 years to make, like they said. I was going to talk about the music a little bit. So Michael Giacchino also worked on Ratatouille. He's done lots of other live-action movies, animated movies. Just knocked it out of the park with the music in this movie.
So good. I love jazz music, and it's so interesting going back and listening to like different soundtracks, especially like nostalgic movies. But The Incredibles is incredible. Sorry.
I knew we were going to make that joke at least once.
No, that was bad. That's my bad. So, but it's so jazzy. Like, it really is.
Very 60s, like almost like James Bond inspired.
I think, I don't know, but it's so cool hearing that in a kid's movie because it is a full like orchestral.
Yeah.
I thought that it was so pretty. I do like in the second movie they made like theme songs for the different characters.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. Like, that was a cute little touch. But even the music in the second one, there's something so, and again, this is probably biased because of nostalgia.
Yeah.
But there's something so iconic about the opening credits scene. But also, even on TikTok, there was this one scene, and it was the Kronos scene. And it was when he's trying to...
I've seen memes of that scene.
Yes, when he's trying to like get into the computer and Kronos is the password. The music that's playing in the background of that trended on TikTok for a while. And
Oh, really?
It kind of bothered me just because every time I would come across that, I'd like... I don't know what would be like triggered in my brain.
I don't remember what the music was like in that scene.
I'm not going to sing it for you.
Okay. No, you don't have to sing it.
I'm not going to sing it for you.
No.
You can listen
That's
to
not
it
a
after
requirement
this.
for the show.
Well, it better not be because I'm not going to do it. But it trended on TikTok, and I remember thinking that was so crazy. And then it was like the comments would be split because some people would be like, is this from The Incredibles? And other people would be like, oh my gosh, what's this song from? I was just like, man, no taste.
Yeah.
You got to remember the OGs.
Well, and I think the music too, like the setting of the whole Incredibles world is so cool because it's like a kind of alternate version of the 60s.
Yeah, is it the 60s? I was going to say it definitely doesn't take place in
No,
the
it's not
early
present
2000s.
day. Yeah, early 2000s.
Is it the 60s? Is that like the
it's supposed to be
style?
the 60s. It's not set in like a particular like set version of any. I think the city is called like Metroville or something. It's vaguely 60s. Yeah, technology.
I mean,
and
that makes
stuff like
sense.
that. Yeah.
Their outfits are, interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, so I want to get a little bit into the story and characters of this movie because there's just so much to unpack here. First of all, I just love the premise of this movie where, the supers are banned and shoved into this superhero relocation program because of the damages they've done to people in the city and everything.
Wait, no, I just have to say, that is such an insane plot for like a kid's
I
movie,
know, that's what, yeah.
Because the entire thing that kickstarts all of the events is the fact that a man tries to jump to his death from a building. Mr. Incredible saves him, and then
He didn't want to be saved.
He didn't want to be saved. Like, that is kind of a real, like,
And
a
he gets
dark
sued.
top.
Yeah.
And then those are all like. I watched this thing about the parallels between that whole thing was being modeled after Citizen Kane. The entire newspaper.
Really?
Like,
Yeah.
All
The
of
old
that
newsreels.
was like not a parody, but kind of like a reference to that. Because side by side, they're almost the exact same. But I don't know. There's just something. There's a lot of really dark concepts in this movie, though. too. And I think that that's really interesting because, like, nowadays I feel like there's a stricter standard for what is allowed and what's not allowed in a children's movie. And I don't think that, even though the man was not successful, I don't think the themes of suicide would be accepted in a kids Pixar film. At least, I don't know. Not nowadays. But there's a few things that are, I mean, it also deals with, like, possible adultery because they think that Helen thinks Bob is cheating on her for a while.
When he finds the hair on his suit and everything, she's like,
there's, I don't know.
Are you really talking about your job in there? You know, like, who are you talking to, Bob? You know.
He's got a conference.
Yeah.
Another town. This is good. I'm gonna start. They're finally recognizing your outlet. You're moving up, honey. This is wonderful.
But, like, I mean, there's so many, like you said, darker themes and stuff, and even, like, where Helen has the conversation with Dash and Violet, where she's like, you know, oh, these aren't the bad guys that we watch on TV. They don't care for
These
kids.
Guys
they
aren't
will
like
kill
those
you.
Guys. They will kill you if you get that chance.
Yeah.
Don't let them get that chance.
And they have to just, you know, deal with that.
Yeah.
And, you know,
it
must be a stressful way to grow up.
It's real though, and then like when they're shooting at them and stuff, like
I know.
I mean, they're bullets. Like they're genuine bullets. People die. People.
Yeah, they're trying to kill these children.
The forest scene when they're chasing Violet and Dash. Also, Dash running on water. I still get really. I think it's so cool.
There's so many great scenes like that.
There's something really satisfying when he realizes and he like laughs the way he does.
Yeah.
Anyways, but the fact that they're being like actively pursued and shot at, and they're two kids who they will kill and are trying to murder.
Yeah.
And then there's like explosions of them running into, and they're like weird. You know, they're like flying things that they.
Yeah, those big discs that like have blades on them. Yeah.
And then they like run into a cliffside and explode. And it's like, oh, they're dead for sure. And the whole thing that when Mr. Incredible, when Bob Parr discovered the Chronos thing, it was because of what was it, Gazer Beam. Gazer Beam. He finds his skeleton in this cave. And he's like, oh, that's what happened to my friend. And then when he's hacking into the computer and he sees all of the like terminated supers, it's like, I don't know. There's a lot of things that are darker concepts that I don't even know if it goes over kids' heads. I do remember when I was a kid, I did not understand the whole beginning scene. I just knew that it was like, oh no, they can't be superheroes anymore.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't really think it ever set in the full extent of like, he even says, I saved your life, and then the guy says, you didn't save my life, you ruined my death. And that's like a really...
I don't remember that. He said that?
Yeah, that's at the beginning.
Oh,
and
wow.
I remember watching it again once I was a little bit older. I remember being like, oh, wow. But there's a few really good one-liners that... You're weak and I've outgrown you.
We gotta talk about Syndrome.
It's so good.
We gotta talk about
love
Syndrome.
Him.
Not Incrediboy, not Buddy. He's Syndrome. So he's introduced as like this super fan. He's that kid from the fan club, Buddy.
Brody, but Buddy.
So
Buddy.
and he is just so admires Mr. Incredible.
Yeah.
But he wants to be seen as, you know, even though he doesn't have superpowers. Oh, I can still be super.
Yeah.
You know, I'm with his inventions and everything, and then his whole plan of making the Omnidroid program. And finding and recruiting all these, recruiting all these former supers to go in and fight the droid. Yeah. And like, he kills like 20 of them. Like when they 20 of them like die fighting the robot until he gets to Mr. Incredible, and he's just like thrilled with having like, oh, I finally found him, and now, you know.
Well, I think one of the reasons that what makes Syndrome such a good villain too is the fact that. Like, he wanted to be a superhero. That's all he wanted. And it was like he met his idol. And there's the whole saying about don't meet your heroes. Never meet your heroes. And he did. And Mr. Incredible was kind of a jerk. He shut
that boy down.
I invented these. I can fly.
I work alone.
Fly home, buddy. Like, that's brutal.
And then that whole scene of him where it's like, it tore me apart. And he's like tearing down the poster.
And that's when I realized you can't trust anyone or you can't look up to anybody, especially your heroes.
Yeah.
And it was like the only reason he finally got Mr. Incredible or Bob's attention is because he said, now you listen to me because I'm a threat. And it's like
that's
this
such a good
full
line. Yeah.
circle moment of being like, Mr. Incredible created this villain unintentionally by just, you know, being kind of full of himself, being like, oh, he's in his prime, nothing can touch me kind of thing. And he was mean or just disrespectful to this kid that idolized him. And all of these years later, Mr. Incredible is kind of indirectly responsible of the killing of like all of the other superheroes besides their family. So, yeah. A little bit.
I just think there's another line where he's like, you know,
did you write lines down?
I did write one line. He said, when everyone's super, no one will be.
Yeah.
Where he's making all these inventions and then he's gonna sell them off to everyone just to like not make the super special anymore. Because if everyone is super, you know, I mean.
Because he felt unspecial as a child. But he also says in that scene, he says, I'm going to become the greatest superhero of all time, because that's the entire time he was making this robot, like calibrating it in order to be unstoppable. So all of the superheroes that went against it that he like recruited was just to slowly make more and more improvements on this robot so that he's the only one that can control it and no one else can defeat it. And so he just wanted to be praised. He wanted to be a superhero. He wanted to have that experience of like the glory of that kind of role, even though he wasn't born with powers. And then he says, I'll sell my invention so that everyone can be super. And when everybody's super, no one will be. Because when everybody is the same, I can't remember, I talked about this concept in like sociology, which
really?
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called. It sounds kind of ridiculous to be like compared to The Incredibles, but it was this concept of like, when everybody is one way, that becomes the new normal.
Yeah.
So when there's only a select few superheroes that have superpowers, all the other people feel like left out. Why can't I be that? Why can't I be exalted in the way that superheroes are? So he dreamed of this his whole life, hated superheroes at that point because of his interactions with Mr. Incredible. He wanted to become the best superhero and then make everybody superheroes, so everybody was kind of on the same level and no one, I mean, kind of, you know, don't disagree with that philosophy. I mean, I'd buy an invention.
You can see where he's coming from.
Oh my gosh, wait, we're talking about like dark things that happened. What about his death scene?
Oh God, where he got sucked into the turbine?
He got chopped up by a propeller.
No capes, man.
That was crazy.
No capes.
Multiple people got chopped up. Because it was
should have known this.
The flying girl, and then the guy that gets caught she gets caught in the jet
Somebody
turbine.
gets sucked into a tornado.
Yes, sucked into a vortex.
Vortex.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Dyna guy, he accidentally gets his cape stuck on like a rocket, and it takes off with him. That was funny.
I'm interested to learn more about your knowledge of Incredibles lore. Not right now. We can talk about it later.
Okay.
But also Frozone.
Yes.
I love Frozone.
Yes.
Samuel L. Jackson. I love Samuel L. Jackson. Of course.
One of the most iconic scenes from the whole movie is the entire interaction. Where's my super suit?
Where's my super suit?
That audio I have heard for over a decade. That is like, if anything was going to be taken from that movie and used or like referenced, I feel like it's but also, you know, Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
He's an icon.
Perfect.
How did they get into that movie? That's what
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm so glad he took that role though.
Oh yeah, no one else could have voiced Frozone the same.
And I also love Bob and Helen's like dynamic.
Yeah.
Because, and talking about, I mean, this isn't a darker theme, but like things that, you know, this isn't necessarily a movie for kids. You know, we talked about this with Ratatouille too. I mean, because it's not strictly a kids movie, because kids can't relate to having a midlife crisis or having, you know, kids marital struggles.
Hey man,
or
it's rough out there.
Yeah. But like having to raise a family and what's best for your family, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, just those interactions between Bob and Helen, like they're not only like entertaining to watch, but like
they feel real.
They do. Because
they argue, they have things that they disagree about, they have like miscommunication, and it's satisfying to watch it all work out in the end, but it's only after all of this like struggle when they finally communicate and they come to an understanding at the end. It's really satisfying to see like a dynamic change. I'd say in characters just in general for the individual characters, but for their relationship, they're already married. So I feel like a traditional arc might be like before they get married, them going through all this stuff, and then maybe he proposes at the end, and then it ends with the wedding. But it's like this movie kind of switched some things up because it went over that and it was like, no, they're already,
because they've been married for like
family.
Years.
Yeah. So it's cool to see, and like just their parenting, how they do argue over that some, but then also like Helen trying to deal with Dash and Violet at the same time on the plane and afterwards.
Yeah, I think like early on in the movie, the dinner scene with them, and it kind of like goes through like showcases how each of their powers is just like kind of disruptive to the family, even though they don't mean for it to be.
Because by then you knew that Violet could turn invisible because you'd seen that already, but the force fields, that was introduced.
The force fields, and then Dash is just running around the table, and she's like, "Bob, intervene!" And she's
it's
like,
time to engage. Do something. Don't just stand there. I need you to intervene.
I just thought that was a really cool scene. I mean, because it's a family of superheroes, so they're not a normal family.
It's cool seeing them interact and it be like, oh, this is normal. And then
for them,
Yeah, exactly. And so it was like, this is just, because that's something that you can relate to, you know, like a chaotic family dinner where everybody's fighting, the siblings are arguing, and I mean, Bob is like working. Supposedly, but so like they're dealing with all this stuff, and it's like there's just these I wouldn't say like magical, but there's these like power fantasy elements to it because they have superpowers, but it's still relatable to audiences, and it doesn't feel like they're forcing these interactions. It's just like, well, they've lived with powers all their lives, so it's like super normal.
And the complications that come from that, like the scene where Dash is in the principal's office, and the guy's like, you know, he's not. The tag was there when I sat. He moves right there.
Right there. Right as I'm sitting down.
Just the complications that they have to endure because, like, you know, they're not supposed to use any of their powers ever.
But they're also kids.
They're also kids.
And if they had these like abilities, like I mean, Dash is how old is he supposed to be? He's in like elementary school.
Yeah.
He's teeny, and so like he has super speed. He's going to use that to like pull a prank on his teacher. Like, of course he would. If they were these like model kids, then it would be more unrealistic. So that's just another element of like depth kind of added to the different characters.
And Bob and Helen are arguing like, oh, well, we should let him try out for sports then. She's like, you know why we can't do that, you know?
It'd be great. I do see the scene at the very end. I've seen this like recently come back up on TikTok too. But the scene of them like screaming at him to get second place.
Oh yeah, just like make it close.
And then there's the guy, and he's like, look, and he looks back up at him, and he's like, what the heck?
Oh yeah, I know that shot.
Cheering, and they're like, no, slow down. No, not that much. And
Dash is like, wait, what?
What? And he's going like ahead of everybody, and then falling back.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know. I think that's funny.
There's so many great scenes of just like showcasing the like unique superhero family dynamic in this movie.
Yeah.
They're just so entertaining.
And them not thinking Jack has any powers the entire movie, and then at the end, have you seen? There's a I don't know if you had like the DVD or something, but there was an extra credits scene, Jack Attack.
Yes, I've seen that. Yeah, with the babysitter.
Love that. Yeah, Nori. I love that because that is so. It's because it's not just like a I don't know, something extra. It's not like a blooper or anything. It's like a missing piece, so we watch the story from this perspective. Yeah. And then you get this little like extra credit type or like deleted scene type thing where you see all of the things that you only heard the results of Nori like screaming into the phone.
She calls Helen and she's like, Jack, some weird things are happening.
Yeah, and then in that one it even shows Syndrome show up at the house.
Oh
because
yeah.
In the original one,
he tried to
The
kidnap
Incredibles,
him.
Well, she's getting these weird, Helen, they're in the car, it's like the big fight had already happened, they're heading home, and you think, oh, okay, it's like over.
Yeah, and she's there.
She's getting those really weird voicemails, they burst into their home and he's already there. And then in the extended one, it's like they have him show up and then there's like an adult joke that goes over a lot of people's heads because he had a giant S for syndrome, and he was like, oh, it stands for sitter because she asked for it, and he was like, I would have had a BS for babysitter, but we both know why I couldn't do
was that in Jack Jack Attack?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I thought that was
That's
so
funny. Okay, so big takeaway about this movie.
I hear when people start talking about like the best Pixar movie or like their favorite Pixar movies, I feel like Ratatouille is often really high up there, but for me, it is The Incredibles.
Yeah.
I think that The Incredibles is the best Pixar movie, and it is because of I have a lot of nostalgia tied to it, but also just all of these elements of like realistic storytelling, depth to all of the characters, to their motives. The soundtrack is amazing. The cast is amazing. The animation was really new and innovative. Like, I just think that there's so many aspects of this movie that I could watch. I mean, obviously I have, but I could watch this movie over and over and over again, and I genuinely don't think I would ever get tired of it.
Oh, I mean, I could too. And a lot of people say it's like one of the best superhero movies. Even just taken out of.
Yeah.
And I researched Brad Bird gets mad when people say that animated films are a genre. And not,
really?
Just like another medium to tell the story with. But
that's fair.
even outside of not the animated genre, Brad Bird, but just like one of the best superhero movies. So
I could get behind that.
Yeah. So we both agree this movie is incredible. Yes. I made that joke
Don't
again.
end it like that, please.
So thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed The Incredibles.
See you next time.
Bye.